Okay, welcome to today's podcast. Today we're going to talk about staying without losing yourself, what it really takes. Now, many women say this quietly, almost as a confession. They say, well, I think I'm staying, but I'm afraid I'm disappearing. So for many neurotypical wives, staying doesn't feel like a clear choice. It kind of feels like endurance, loyalty, responsibility, fear of regret. So in today's episode, let's talk about what it actually means to stay without losing yourself and why staying only works when you remain intact. Now, this is not an argument for staying, but it's kind of a reality check for what staying requires. Now, before we go further, let's pause for a moment. We'd like for you to take one slow breath in. Let it out gently. Okay. You don't need to justify your choice to anyone here. The questions in this episode came from women who said something along the lines of, I'm still here, but I don't recognize myself anymore. So if that resonates, let's slow this down together. Here's question 1, and all these questions have been summarized. Is it possible to stay without losing myself? Yes. But not by continuing the same patterns, though. Staying without losing yourself requires structural changes, not just emotional endurance. Okay? You can't stay intact while suppressing your needs, carrying the emotional load alone, hoping instead of grounding, absorbing ongoing harm. So staying works only when self-preservation becomes non-negotiable. Okay? Now, if a part of you feels relieved hearing this, let's pause. Relief often points to truth. Now, one listener wrote, I stayed, but I became smaller. Okay? And here's a related question. How do I know if I'm already losing myself? Well, that's a great question. Common signs would include you no longer share openly, you doubt your perceptions, you feel emotionally numb, you avoid conflict at all cost, maybe you stop expecting comfort from, in this case, we're talking about the ASD spouse, for those of you who are suffering from Cassandra Syndrome. Maybe you don't know what you want anymore. So these are not personality changes, okay? We'll just call them protective adaptations. Now, if you recognize yourself here, let's pause. Awareness is not condemnation. Now, many women asked some version of this next question with some guilt. Isn't staying supposed to mean acceptance? I would say no. Acceptance is not self-sabotage. Let's look at healthy acceptance. Healthy acceptance says, I see the limits clearly. I stop bargaining with reality. I adjust expectations honestly. Unhealthy acceptance would say, I silence myself. I stop needing. I disappear to keep the peace. So, accepting without self-sabotage preserves your dignity. Unhealthy acceptance costs your dignity. Now, if you've been confusing acceptance with endurance, let's pause, because they're not the same. One listener asked, what does staying look like when it's healthy? Okay? Another version of that question was, what does healthy staying actually require? Okay. So healthy staying, we're talking about staying in the marriage, requires emotional boundaries, external emotional support, and hopefully this channel is one of your external emotional supports, reduced overfunctioning, internal permission to feel disappointed, and a life that does not revolve around managing your ASD spouse. Staying without losing yourself means decentering the relationship as your sole emotional source. Now, if that idea feels stabilizing, Notice it. Stability is a sign of alignment. Now, several women ask this next question with a certain degree of fear. What if I stay and nothing changes? Okay, well, that is a real possibility, and one you deserve to consider honestly. But staying can't be conditional on someone else being different, okay? It must be sustainable as it is, with boundaries and support in place. So if staying only works if he changes, then staying is still based on hope, not clarity. Now, if fear shows up here, let's pause. Fear doesn't mean wrong, it means honest. One listener asked this next question very softly. She said, can I stay and still grieve what I don't have? Absolutely, and grief is essential here. Staying without grieving leads to numbness. Grieving allows you to stay awake and present. We would want that. You can love someone and still mourn. You can mourn the intimacy you hoped for, the emotional partnership you needed, the marriage you imagined. Grief does not negate love, it honors reality. Now, if grief feels close to the surface now, let's pause. Grief is not weakness, it's truth processing. Now, many women ask this next question with confusion. How do I stop disappearing if I stay in this marriage? Okay, well, you stop disappearing by speaking honestly without over-explaining, feeling fully without self-judgment, choosing self-care that isn't permission-based, letting go of managing his emotions, and claiming space for your inner life. Staying without losing yourself is an active practice, not a passive choice. Now, if this feels empowering and daunting at the same time, let's pause. Both reactions make sense. One listener asked this next question with honesty. What if staying starts hurting me again? Okay, then I would say staying needs to be reevaluated. Staying is not a lifelong contract at any cost, okay? It's a choice that must remain emotionally sustainable. You are allowed to reassess, and you're allowed to reassess over and over again as the future unfolds. Staying is not a moral obligation, it's a lived experience. Now, if permission just appeared, notice it, because that matters. Now, several women ask this next question with a certain degree of self-doubt. Am I weak if I stay? Absolutely not. Staying with clarity and boundaries takes strength. So does leaving. Weakness is not defined by the choice. It's defined by losing yourself in the process. Your worth is not measured by endurance. Now, if you've been judging yourself harshly, let's pause. Self-respect matters more than appearances. Here's a question that came up over and over again. How do I know if I'm staying with myself? Okay, you can ask yourself, do I still recognize who I am? Do I trust my inner voice? Do I feel emotionally safer than before? Do I have support beyond this relationship? Staying with yourself means you're no longer abandoning your inner life to preserve this neurodiverse marriage. Now, if you're staying in the marriage, let me say this very clearly. Staying does not require self-sacrifice, but it does require self-presence. You're allowed to stay and stay whole at the same time. And if staying ever requires you to disappear, that is information, not failure. Now, I have some reflection questions for you. In what ways have I adapted that cost me something important? What parts of myself feel most absent right now? What would staying with self-respect look like? What support do I need if I choose to stay? And what truth feels clear after hearing this podcast? No decisions required today. Integrity comes before outcome. Now, in the next episode, We'll talk about what a healthy exit actually looks like in the event that you decide not to stay. And we're going to look at what it looks like emotionally, practically, and psychologically. So until then, be gentle with yourself. You're not here to endure, you're here to live. If this resonated, please like, subscribe, and comment. I read and respond to all comments, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next podcast tomorrow. Thanks for watching. If you are a neurotypical wife in a marriage with an ASD level 1 husband, and you feel like you're suffering from Cassandra Syndrome, then there's going to be a link below this video in the description area and also pinned in the comment section that will take you to my Cassandra Syndrome recovery group. We meet 1 hour a week for 4 weeks. I hope to see you in that group.